Hello everyone, welcome to another video. In this video we are going to discuss about default implementations on C# interfaces, but we are also going to see how interfaces have been evolving over time in C# with some small examples, okay? So speaking of interfaces, you would commonly see before C# 8, which was the C# version where default interfaces have been introduced and interfaces have been evolving ever since. It would be common for you to see something like this public interface, let's say I interface, something like this. And then you would have void method A as an example. Okay. Then you would have like method B. Then you would have like method C. Okay. So this was your regular interface where you would create abstractions over behavior. Okay. This is where you would normally use interfaces for contracts, abstractions over behavior, and so on. But with C# 8, something new was introduced, which was default implementations, okay, on interface methods. What this means in practice is now when you introduce a method, let's say method D, in your interface, you now can actually give an implementation to this method. Okay, and by doing so, again, method D, by doing so, if someone is implementing this interface, they are not required to implement this default method, this method that has this default implementation. And in under specific circumstances, they can use this default method. When I mean specific circumstances is when if you have some class that implements this interface, whenever that class is used, should be used in place of the interface. Otherwise, if you use the specific class, you would not have access to this method. I know it's a bit confusing, but I will show you an example soon, okay? So this is pretty much all you have to know about default implementations in interfaces. It's something that was introduced in C# 8, and as I just said, it allows you to give some kind of default behavior in interface methods. Now we can actually see an example of this. Let me clean up this a bit, and let me just create an implementation for this method B. And put console.writeLine default implementation of method B in interface. Okay. Now let's create a couple of classes here just for exemplification. So classes that implement this interface. So let's say public class I class A for as an example, and that class implements I interface. Okay. And because of that, we'll of course implement this. But as you can see, the by default, when you tag the interface, you only implement the methods that have no body attached to them. Okay, you noticed here that it didn't provide an implementation for this default implementation method, and that's actually what you want, because the purpose, and you may be wondering to yourself, why was this introduced in the first place. So this default implementation was introduced because you want your interfaces to grow over time, okay, which is a natural thing, and you don't want the clients that are implementing those interfaces that are constantly evolving over time. You don't want those clients to break if they do any upgrade. If you release a new version of that interface, for example, okay, you would want them to still keep up to date with the package or whatever they are using your interface from. You want them to continuously upgrade, but do not have those breaking changes. Otherwise, if you didn't have this, it would be mandatory for all the customers that would upgrade this interface to actually implement this method. Okay, it can become quite cumbersome. Okay, so this was introduced. So continuing on with our example, this actually doesn't matter at all. We'll just ignore this. Okay, now let's create an example with this iClass A, or in this case, let me rename this just to class A. Let me just create a program class. Okay, public static void. And let me show you what I was mentioning before, okay, which is in which circumstances can this default method exist and be accessible by any class that implements this interface. So if you target class A, okay, you would notice something, okay, that you don't have this method B available to you, okay? You don't have this method B. This method B only belongs to the interface definition. So you would have to have some kind of polymorphism here. So iInterface instance, so that instance can access method B. Okay. So if you are accepting on a, let's say on a method, on the parameters of a method, you target class A. So something like, I don't know, private static, I don't know, if you put like class A here, you cannot access method B. If you want to access method B, you would have to target iInterface so that method B would be available to you, okay? So if you don't target the right type, then you don't access this default method, okay? So in this case, as I was showing you, let's run this and see what's the output on the console. Okay, and you can see here that the output is default implementation of method B in interface. Okay. Now, what happens if I don't want this default implementation and I actually want to override this? Okay. So the only thing you would have to do is public void method B. So actually have the same signature as you would have on the interface. And then I can keep this console write line here, okay? So what matters is to override, you have to have the same signature as you would have on the interface, okay? And now when we run this, you should see here that the output is now class A's implementation of method B, okay? Again, if we ignore this, then what you would see is the default implementation, okay? So this is pretty much all you have to check for what it refers to when it comes to default implementations, okay? Now, since we're speaking about interfaces, maybe it's worth to speak about evolution of interfaces over time, because they haven't been static. Okay, they evolve over time. Okay, and now let's see some practical examples of that. Okay, so back in the days, as I told you, the interfaces, they would only have those contracts, as we saw at the beginning of the video, but they have evolved over time. So one of the things was this default implementations, but also now with interfaces, you can have fields, private static fields. So you can have private static int a equals 5 as an example. So a equals 5. Okay, you can have something like this. The keyboard is not cooperating today. So you can have this. You were not able to have this kind of things before, and now you can actually use this here as an example. So I can put here a $, and then put here value of a, and then put here a, and then when we run this, you would actually see the value of fields of this field on the interface. Okay. So another thing you can have in interfaces now, I give you a hint, this private access modifier can now be used, but you can also have private methods as well. Okay, so you can have private methods and then call them from within other methods. Okay, so as you can see, there is no issues. Then private method is actually executed as well. Okay, they can also be static. Okay, can also be static methods. Okay, still everything works the same. So interfaces have evolved so much over time that the question arises, which is why have interfaces evolved in a way that they are so much look alike abstract classes? They are still, and I will ignore the differences between them because if you look design-wise, interfaces, they, in my perspective, they should be contracts or express what something does. Okay, while abstract classes or classes in general, they are what something is. So they have the inheritance as one of the big characteristics of it. And of course you can implement multiple interfaces, and inheriting only works for one class at a time. So you can only inherit from something only one thing at one given time. So ignoring those differences, the line becomes a bit blurry between interfaces now and abstract classes. And I would personally, I don't like this. I see why this was introduced, but I wouldn't personally use this default methods. Of course, if you're building a library and you don't want customers to break, sure. But that's why we have things like release notes and breaking changes on specified on the release notes and so on. So there's actually ways around it, but there might be some edge case where you can actually find this useful and whatnot. I wouldn't personally use private methods and this on interfaces unless on very specific occasions. I never use this, to be honest. Normally, I would only use interfaces for very well-defined contracts and abstractions over the behaviors. And yeah, I use just abstract classes for everything that is inheritance related, related to what something is and not what something does. And yeah, so as you can see, the line becomes a bit blurry, but I would still use interfaces as they were originally created before C# 8. Okay. And yeah, that's all I wanted to share. So it's just some thoughts on this interface evolution over time. Hopefully you've enjoyed this video, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.